Obviously.
Well, I'm not trying to draw attention to your 70th, but it makes a nice little...
I've been collecting wine for a long time. I've got a lot of wine in my cellars I love, and I'm interested in how it's getting on and everything else. So I don't have to go out for every bottle. And that affects one's attitude to some extent. Obviously, for my pocket wine book, I've got to have a sense of proportion about what goes on in the whole world, without obviously being able to be on the front line everywhere myself. So I can't do the necessary direction and editing with the contributors unless I can reassure them that it's coming back to a sort of platform that's being appreciated, and so that I can say I don't believe it sometimes. No, I have to sometimes, you know. So right now is a good moment, really, because Stephen Brooke and I have just been doing a new edition of My Wine Companion, coming out later in the year. And it's 5 years, I think, since we did it last. And I've been absolutely astounded with what Stephen's come up with.
In terms of the changes and the progress.
I mean, it is such a read now. I mean, I'm absolutely gasping with thirst by the time I've got through a page, because it is, you know, on the whole, the news is so good and so exciting, which we all know, but then when you see it all in front of you, all the evidence, it's quite brilliant. So, whichever country you look at, I've been saying to Stephen, God, I can't wait to go there. And he goes to South America quite a bit. That's one of his, obviously California very much.
Yes, yeah.
I haven't been to South America for ages.
Are there, through reading this, are there particular, and through what you've tasted, are there particular New World countries that you are especially excited about?
Well, the great thing is they keep renewing themselves, don't they? I was a bit, as many people were, I think I was a bit sort of tired of California wine and what they were doing. I think we've all gone through that phase. You know, too strong, not drinkable with food and all that. They seem to be losing their way. But recently, I've seen a lot of wines from California that have obviously taken in this message and become much more lively and balanced. And so, new interest in California, yes. I mean, it doesn't have to be a new country.
Sure.
But this is a very good moment to take a new look at California.
Because you think of the progress because you think they're veering out into a new direction, or just because you think that people are getting a bit.
I think that partly their customers are getting more sophisticated and realizing that, you know, they want a third dimension to their wine. That's important. And Parker's influence is said to be waning.
Yes, because you've been critical in the past of that style of wine. So you're obviously a little bit buoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want it. Very simple.
And is that something which also puts you off other New World wines, Australian or Argentinian or whatever it may be?
Sweetness and heaviness and all the things that. I mean, sweetness is a terrible thing that you know, I feel so refreshed when I find a dry wine. Last night we opened a bottle of Bierzo from Leon. Wonderful grape variety called Menciado. Yeah. And I just thought, God, I love this. You know, it has steely tannin. It's all about structure and balance. I couldn't attempt to describe any aromas in that. You know, it was just wine. But wine of a shape and satisfying, penetrating capacity and balance, not too heavy. And I thought, wow, that's what it's all about. And I said the first thing about it wasn't sweet.
Right.
Unlike most things.
It's that which in the past has deterred you a bit from drinking more New World wine, or?
Yeah, but more recently. I mean, when I first met them, The first California wines that I tasted in numbers were wines of the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And they weren't sweet at all, nor were they heavy. You know, your Napa Cab then was 12.5, like Bordeaux, really. Mm-hmm. Bordeaux maybe less than, I agree, but...
This is exactly what came up in our last California Cabernet tasting. Half the panel was saying these wines, levelled all the criticisms that you've just levelled at them. They're too sweet, they're not drinkable with food, etc. And Stephen Brooke actually brought that very thing up, saying that the Californians are capable of making much more balanced, elegant, etc. wines. But then the rest of the panel was saying that this, that they're not stupid. They're making wines for their market.
Yes.
So in that sense, I mean, are sort of 250 million Americans wrong?
Yeah, they are, Eric. But but that leaves about probably 20 million or something who are discovering themselves. I mean, doesn't that the market that is going to appreciate what I can only call a more sophisticated kind of California wine does not have to be the whole population of America. That's not the point. The polarization will continue. There will be popular wines, and there will be wines that I'll invite you to take them seriously. The other great theme that I think needs tackling is the question of age. I mean, it's very obvious, but investment in time is one of the great problems now. Shove it through as quick as
wines
possible.
too early?
Well, wines are being made to be drunk too early in the sense that they're never going to achieve very much.
Right.
Because they're going to rush through the system straight away.
Right.
It's not that those same wines that winemakers are making now would necessarily improve with keeping. They're not being made to improve with keeping. Why should they? Because nobody's going to keep them.
And again, do you think this is more prevalent? Is this something that's more prevalent among New World wines?
Bordeaux is the only region that confidently makes wines to be laid down, to be sold, resold. A resale market is so important to Bordeaux, but it's got to be able to guarantee the wines will still be there in 10 years or 20 years. But what other region operates on that basis? I mean, even vintage port is being made to gobble up quick now, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's something which upsets you, is it?
Well, I wouldn't say it upsets me. I mean, each generation has to reinvent the world. But it does throw away one of the greatest joys of wine, which is the complexity of age. You can't arrive at that quickly. So you can ignore it.
Having said that, Bordeaux is you say it's the only region that's still confidently making wines to lay down and be resold, but still Bordeaux is shortening that window, isn't it? I mean, are they not?
I'm not
most
sure.
Sort of not thinking of them.
Is it really? You can say that. What are the vintages that are really drinking now, looking full of promise, but really good now? Things like 89 and 90. Well, 20 years old. And what's wrong with the 2000s are drinking well now, but there's a huge lot of potential in them. I think we tend to assume that our ancestors drank older wines without actually having the figures to prove it.
Yes. Have you found many New World wines have you got many in your cellar that you age?
Well, there is an example often quoted of a wine that actually changes its nature so much with age that there's not much point in treating it as the same wine, and that's Hunter Semillon.
Yes. Yeah.
If what you really enjoy is that extraordinary, toasty, gentle, but characterful character that arrives after 9 or 10 years in bottle, there's no good opening a new bottle. It's as simple as that. Rieslings have always been like that to me. I mean, I've just, I'd lay down Rieslings, yes, all the time.
Equally from Australia, you mean, as well as the Mosel?
Well, actually, the other day, I opened a bottle of Grosset's Polish Hill. No, sorry, what? No. Quite wrong. It was a Henschke's Riesling.
Okay.
1990. Under a screw cap. Revelation. absolutely, it was still pale green.
Right.
It was a simply heavenly wine with no oily, petrol-y, paraffin-y smell at all.
Okay.
No,
That
it's simply
had gone.
Well, I don't think
Would
it's
it
ever been there.
once or no?
No, I don't think so. I think that, I've always thought that's just a sort of hot climate sign that I'd rather avoid.
Really, you're not a fan of that type?
I'm not a fan of it at all, no.
It's almost the signature style of a lot of Clare Valley and
It is.
other Australian Rieslings.
But I think when they're really beautifully made, as Grossets are, for example,
Yeah.
they have, the better they are, the less of that they have.
You think? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But without the touch of residual that you get with a lot of modal wines, it was still pretty bone dry. I imagine. Yeah.
Very much so.
Do you find many Australian Rieslings of that ilk, or?
Well, there were probably more than I know, quite honestly. I mean,
You stick to the
very
names,
safe
you know.
with ones that I know and
Yeah.
really respect. And there are quite a few.
Mm.
I just think it's so ironic that Riesling comes back into people drinking via Australia, and Australia has struggled to make good Riesling, when in Germany it's like falling off a log.
I think Riesling is the one area where the New World is actually becoming its own benchmark, in a way. That people can now refer to Australian Rieslings separately to
Yeah.
European Rieslings as their own style, and they've broken free almost.
The styles are very different, aren't they?
What it is.
This is the Chilean Casablanca Syrah.
Isn't it? Nice.
Gorgeous,
Is it good?
isn't it?
Very,
I'll
very
try
good,
it
isn't
again.
it?
Well, it won an award in our tasting, so I'm glad that you like it.
Nice.
I purposely brought out
Smell was-
Bayo Oscuro.
a Chilean Syrah and a South African Syrah that we've got here.
Okay.
Just as not so much as a comparison, but just because I think they're both Chile
that's
Chile and South Africa are both doing pretty good
Very
things
nice.
with their own varietals, so that'll be interesting.
I thought I loved the first
I
Montes
come back to
Syrah when it came out. Still got it.
No, is it?
Montes Folly when that first came out. I thought it was terrific.
Oh yes, you like that? Not too big for you? I mean, it's
Well,
pretty.
yeah, it is, but that's personal taste doesn't come into it when the wine is really good, does it?
That's interesting because it's something that I think all our tasters, try to abide by that philosophy. You've got to put personal taste to one side and say, is this a good wine?
Yes,
But it's something I
but it
find
has to be
difficult to
before
do,
you can
right?
even start to do that.
Right.
If it's a mediocre wine,
Then
it's no good saying put personal taste aside. The wine's got to say something quite loud and clear before you can say, right, this is certainly good even if I don't like it.
But with a wine like that, how much of it can you drink if you think this is a really good wine, but it's not to my taste?
Oh, distressingly much, I'm afraid.
But how does that work with Bordeaux, for example, and the fact that so much is not tasted blind? I mean, so do you mean the wine is either good or bad?
Oh, no, I'm not a purist.
Or not
I'm not a purist. I'm not like the Australian show judges who say, well, that however good that wine is, it's got faults, so I'm going to give it nothing.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
It's a totally different
But you
approach
see-
to that, isn't it?
No, it's more fundamental than that, because what do I look for in wine? I look for qualities. I do not look for faults. I don't.
And this is, we're talking now about when you're drinking wine, not when you're
No,
assessing it. Or,
I don't do an awful lot of judging, but,
No.
but if I am involved in judging, I'm still looking for good points, and if I don't find any, well, don't want the wine. But it's the glass half full and the glass half empty approach, really. And I'm not a chemist, and I've got no reason to be looking for faults in a wine. I've got every reason to be hedonistic about it and say there's something in that that really appeals to me. Okay, it's corked and streaks of sulphur and everything else, but I know that in there's something really worth having.
have you tried any New Zealand Rieslings? Just coming back to that.
Oh yes, a sort of. Oh yeah. In fact, I tried every Riesling I could get my hands on when I was last there, a couple of years ago. And I think that too many of them made it too sweet for me.
Really?
There's a tendency to have residual sugar, which I think is a pity.
And yet you obviously think it works better in the Mosel.
Well, there's an incredible charm about it. I love cabinet wines. I mean, the Mosel is all about cabinets. The Auslesers can be impressive and luscious and everything else. Spätlesers tend to be neither fish nor fowl to me a bit.
Okay.
But the incredible lightness and purity of a really good cab wine is like nothing else on earth. I mean, it is so different from all other wines. In fact, I think nowadays people here tend to think about Germany in terms of the Moselle, and rather forget the Rhine because they realise the Moselle is out on its own in its style.
Have you got any regions now that you think to yourself, I'd really like to know more about that place? This is somewhere that really intrigues me. I'd like to. Places that you want to go to that have developed over more recent years that you've not been able to explore as much as you'd like to?
I feel a biblical quote coming off.
Good.
Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. I mean, I'm not planning ahead like that. I've got so many things to enjoy. I've almost given up doing any trip that's longer than a few days.
Yeah.
So many things to come back to.
No, because I was looking back through a couple of your columns, and there's a couple of things I picked up on, when you did the column about how vintages were losing their importance. I could see where you were coming from. And also there was another one in which you said that appellations were losing our trust.
Oh, no.
It was quite interesting. Do you remember that?
I didn't remember it, but I believe in it.
My hunch is that appellations are gradually losing our trust. The French system has quasi-religious authority, but Italy's attempts to draw such boundaries has never really convinced us. Germany keeps redrafting its map, and Spain's system is embryonic. And you went on to say great winemakers are what validate vineyards. They're the ones to follow. And I think you said something similar at the end of the vintage piece. Follow producers, not vintages.
Oh yeah,
and
well I think that's.
But isn't that what the New World is all about? They don't put too much truck into ACs or into vintages.
Yeah, but the further they get into it, the more experience they get, the more you hear the sort of appellation story and the vintage story from them.
They're trying to.
Once you start taking your own wine really seriously, that's the line you follow. It's not something cooked up by the French.
Isn't it interesting though? You're absolutely right, I'm sure. But
it's always the next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
We got to a stage where the New World's trying to be more like the Old World and trying to embrace.
I don't think they're trying to be anything. I think they're just following the logic. As they become more knowledgeable, more interested in their own wine and what their vineyards will produce, that's the line they're bound to follow. What other line is there?
Yeah. But equally, I get the impression sometimes the Old World is okay, not maybe trying, but appreciates the benefits of some of the lack of regulation the New World has.
Then I don't think it knows how lucky it is. I mean, the people who complain they can't plant Syrah in the Loire or something. Yeah. They are so lucky as to have this clear identity that the world respects.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because with the Australians, though, it's actually a sort of very pragmatic economic thing on the basis that anybody can make Chardonnay, but only this region can make this region's Chardonnay. So anybody can make Riesling, but only Eden Valley can make Eden Valley Riesling. And as long as they can teach people that,
as soon as there's a consensus about that, they're going to draw a line around the region.
Yeah.
And they're going to give themselves a appellation. It's a natural thing to do.
But I was at a seminar the other day on Napa, and I was amazed by a couple of stats they came out with. I mean, Napa is 1/8 of the size of Bordeaux, and it produces, as a percentage, how much do you think Napa makes of California's wine, Napa Valley?
Napa Valley, California's wine. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. I really.
It's a rather cruel question because it's very easy to make a fool of yourself. But
that's quite a lot, I think.
I think you're very, very low percentage.
4%.
Yeah.
4%.
Amazing, wasn't it?
Well,
And if you say California to most people, they say Napa, and then maybe Sonoma, and 4%. And yet within that,
California makes like 99% of American wine.
well, probably not by volume, I wouldn't have thought, but yeah, a lot. But what I was going to go on to, it's an eighth of the size of Bordeaux Napa, and yet it's got 14 different viticultural areas, they call them, AVAs.
yeah.
And that's too many, isn't it? Who's going to... And we have these winemakers up there, quite, well-known guys from Cape Verde and Schaefer.
Yeah.
And somebody actually asked them, if I laid up all these wines, a blind tasting with different AVAs, could you tell the difference? And they happily admitted no.
But a few years ago, or quite a few years ago, I was asked to chair a seminar organised by Tim Mondavi on this very thing, the AVAs of Napa. And can you tell a stage leap from a Rutherford? Well, maybe you can't tell a Pauillac from a Saint-Estèphe either.
Wow. Do you think you can? I mean, that's an interesting one. Do you think the differences among communes in Bordeaux are becoming more blurred?
Well, to be really honest, to be brutal about it, it seems to me that we talk more about communes than we talk less about varieties. I mean, now everybody knows that Pauillac is Cabernet led, but they didn't in the past.
Right.
The profile of a commune was based on its varietal mix, really. We said this is the character of Pomerol rather than this is the character of Merlot. So I think we've all wised up a bit. And that maybe character is not determined by so much by where the commune boundaries are, but by where the soils are within the commune and this kind of thing. I mean, how can Mouton, Pontet, Canet, and all stuff, they don't taste alike, and they're both Pauillac. And frankly, I can't tell you off the top of my head what the percentages of Cabernet are in two of them, but the roots of difference are not. Well, maybe it's only in Burgundy that it's all Pinot Noir. And the soil changes may not be obvious, but the water regime and everything else does change in a way which is actually significant and consistent, which is the most remarkable thing of all.
Just again, but going back to things you've written in the past, you were a couple of years ago. You were quite critical of, not critical, but you were. I think you were sceptic of Oncomar, thinking that basically the wines are tasted too early.
But they are. I don't think that's changed.
And you said that now Burgundy and the Rhone are trying to promote that a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
That's obviously something you're still.
Well, Burgundy is a bit different, isn't it? Because they're not making assemblage.
Right. Yeah. So you think that validates it a bit more, does it, or tasting the wines?
If you know how to taste them, yeah, I reckon it probably does. But you know perfectly well with a big chateau, there's absolutely no guarantee that what you're being given to taste is really representative.
I mean,
they're going to choose the worst barrel and they get the sample.
Yeah. So the system is open to abuse for you.
Oh, it's widely abused, I'm absolutely sure of it.
In what sense is it abused?
In the sense that when you go to Bordeaux next week, they put a sample of Chateau X in front of you, they're not going to tell you what the sample is. It's some wine they made last year.
But there's no
lots of
guarantee.
wines last year.
There's no guarantee that
By definition, they've got wines all over the place that they made last year. They chose one for you, in a sense.
What would you?
Well,
what would you prefer?
I mean, what is the reason? What is the reason
later?
for showing you wines because early? It is to get your money out of it. I mean, no, it's the turnover. It's all about turnover, and therefore it's under their control. If they think the wine is going to show better and be more honestly representative later on, they better go to their bank managers and sort it out, or put the price up, which is what will happen in the end. But they put the price up anyway, so they could afford to do it.
Right. You would prefer them to be shown later, would you?
Oh yes, we would.
Is this something that you've always thought?
I've never been either qualified or desperately interested in getting in early with buying wines as soon as possible. It started in the States. It probably would have happened everywhere, but it certainly started in the States. Buying wines before they were made. There used to be a lot of buying sur souche, where you went in and bought the crop on the vine.
Yeah.
Just sur
souche, which means before the wine is made, isn't it?
Oh, you might call it sur pied, you know. And souche is the vine stock. That used to be a common expression.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's very old. I mean, brokers used to go in and say, Mr. Lairby, I really think I've got a really good market for your wine. I'll take it now. Don't even bother making it.
As a consumer, how do you make your decision if you're buying Bordeaux, which you obviously do? How do you make your decision as what to buy and when?
Well, after most other people, I suppose. Well, the premier tastings provide a wonderful service to consumers in that they give you a big spread of opinions.
And early opinions.
Yeah, you can hear copycatism going on. I mean, you can hear people waiting to hear what Barker says and wants them to give their opinion. But if you take your time, you will find there's a consensus. And the consensus will have made the best wines more expensive, sure. And then you can take a view on where do I belong in this pyramid of price. And taking a view that now I know, 2 years or 3 years later, I now know that this vintage is viewed by the public in this way. It's a must-have, or it's a not quite sure, or we think there are good values in there.
Yeah.
By this time you've done a bit of tasting.
Yeah.
You've got an idea of I remember when the 2001s were brought to London in bottle.
Mm-hmm. In bottle?
Yeah, with lots of people being sceptical, saying, oh, it isn't a 2000. It doesn't have the magic 3 noughts. That was just going to the Grand Cru tasting.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at those wines and thought, wow, I know I'm going to be drinking a lot of these.
Right.
But that didn't have to be done the morning after.
No. And yet, with something like 2001, as you say, it was probably beneficial to wait, because I imagine the prices on release, well, I imagine they were no higher a year or two later, because everyone, as you say, had written it off and everyone had overspent on the 2000s.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of opportunity that people are looking for, isn't it?
Whereas with something like 2005, if you'd have adopted the same tactic then, you'd have been priced out of the market by the time the wines were bottled.
Yeah. Therefore, it's very important to take a view, to keep reading, to know what's building up. You can learn an awful lot without tasting the wine. In fact, you can learn much more with that than with tasting. You really can't. You absorb the information that's in the air.
Do the same rules apply for Burgundy and the Rhone?
Unless you're an expert taster, yeah. You've got to take all the publicity with a big pinch of salt, because obviously they're selling it. They're going to say, whatever it is, this is a vintage where the whites are very pure and classical, and the reds have got a lot of local variation, but you can taste the terroir. There's kind of one merchant talk.
Yes.
Anyone can do it.
Of which there seems to be more and more.
There's more and more and more, and they're getting better and better at it.
Right.
I think you've got to hold your horses.
Yeah.
And no, incidentally, I was so thrilled to see this year in the Burgundy tastings that nearly all the wines were offered in 6s. Right. 2 years ago, I kicked up a fuss.
Did you?
And I said, I do not want to make up my mind at these tastings whether I want 12 of this and none of that. I'd like 6 of each, thank you very much.
Right.
And I went round to people like Chris Davey and the specialists. I said, why don't you sell them in 6s? This year, I'd say they will do.
Oh, well, excellent. Excellent. Are you taking the credit for that?
I'm not. I'm mentioning it. Sure, it wasn't me, but
note that down.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I don't want to claim the credit. It's just an observation.
No, it's good.
It's a good development. That's the
Yes.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. Just we've kind of got off our New World topic a little, a little bit, as I suspected we might. But in terms of your drinking at home,
Children?
and I'm just talking kind of everyday drinking, not special occasions. Do you have favourite places within New World that you tend to?
I mean, I'll tell you honestly, we drink far more European wine.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
like 9 out of 10 bottles.
Really? Yeah. So a New World wine for you would still be a little bit of a, not a novelty, but a little bit of a something a bit different.
Exactly. Yeah. And very carefully noted. And and also, I'm probably pretty unusual in having a cellar of old New World wines.
Right.
And I can pull out a Napa cab of this, or late 70s or early 80s now, you see.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes a complete revelation. Sensational it can be. And I would not have enjoyed it that much when I was young.
Right.
What sort of producers would those be from those days? Maybe sort of the early.
Well, the last one I had was a 1980 Chapelet signature, whatever you know, the best vineyard cab. And Don Chapelet is a guy who's always said, I want to make Latour. And you could have just about fooled me.
Really?
Yeah. And I'd certainly say that I wouldn't find an 80 in Bordeaux as good as that now.
No. Interesting.
And this is 80s California. But does your cellar obviously includes all the great vintages from the 90s? Have you got
No, I wouldn't say it does systematically, because with California I never know which the great vintages are.
No. Well, the 97
Yeah.
It goes back to your comments about vintages. I mean, you don't. I was going to say, you don't really associate. I wouldn't know where to start if someone asked me what were the best California vintages of the 80s and 90s, would you? I don't know.
Well, we were asking James Hocking yesterday.
What did he say?
Well, he was saying 06 was a great vintage.
Well, that's the one they're trying to sell, isn't it?
Well, absolutely.
But you've got a heat wave vintage. Everybody builds it up and say, oh, wine has never had so much, gives it everything. And then the next year is a cooler vintage. And this is like 74 and 75 in the Napa Valley. The following year they said, oh, well, it didn't really ripen like it did last year. 2 years later they were saying, but these have got staying power. This is really classic wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's partly a lack of experience on everybody's part.
The South African wine is perfectly nice. Hasn't got the
It's dull compared
hasn't
to
got the
Chile.
depth of the
It's
Chile
very
wine.
dull, isn't it, really?
It's perfectly drinkable, but it's quite linear, isn't it? It's
What goes medals? Perhaps they know something we don't.
Well, it did well in our tasting as well, but they both did, which is why I picked them out. But side by side, it's
I think side by side is bound to show.
It's a different type of wine.
Against the Chilean. The Chilean is much more.
The Chilean's 2 years older.
I think it's very nice wine.
I think that matters quite a bit too.
Yeah, maybe. What, do you think the South African one's got somewhere to go?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Because
No, I think it
one thing I find very difficult to judge with wines is where they're going and their ageability. What do you look for in that?
Oh, God. Instinct tells you that it's not all there yet, but
how do you know? I mean, if you're tasting, you could taste a 4 pound wine and you could say, well, this isn't all there. How do you know that's not going to go anywhere and this one is?
quite. Well, experience tells you that ageability depends on structure more than stuffing, if you like. You know, that just thickness doesn't necessarily go anywhere at all. So you look in the wine for the way it's built, the charbon, the acidities, the tannins.
Okay.
I don't do it analytically. I just feel that that's the way it is.
It's become instinct now at that stage. Yeah.
And at a certain point in the wine's youth, very often what I call the stuffing, just the thick, sweet newness of it, Well, it hides what's going on underneath. I mean, it's very obvious. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's one
But
thing
I've got time on my side because I've got a number of bottles under the stairs, and therefore I never feel like, I'll taste a bottle, but I never feel like this is the wine I've got to drink because I'm always going back to something. I keep nearly all wines longer than most people.
Yeah.
Nearly all.
And do you? I mean, presumably most wines you have are in cases or by six.
Oh no,
No?
bottles too.
So if you've got only a bottle or two of something, how do you make the decision when to open it? Because with a case, obviously you can try one every so often and come back, but
Well, if it's a long range wine, a good red or something, then I will take a view based on what I read and what people say and everything else.
But from what you're saying, you're suggesting that you tend to be a bit more, perhaps optimistic. You think, well, I'll leave it a bit longer.
Oh, really? I am. Optimism is my nature, and I always think, however good it is now, perhaps it'll get a bit better.
You must have some disappointments, I'm sure. I mean, you taste something and it's gone or it's finished.
But then, no, I commit the ultimate sin. I actually enjoy wine that's over the top because
you know
then it declares itself in certain ways, and its origins, if you're lucky, become very clear, and you can forgive it its sins because it brings up memories of this and the other. In other words, it is not a purely, there's nothing subjective. There's nothing objective about it. It's I may love a wine because I love the person who made it, and I'm absolutely unabashed about that.
Right.
I think that is 50% of the sum of the wine, really.
Which is why we taste blind, of course. You can't. I'm not sure. I agree. It's impossible not to be swayed when you know what the wine is by your preconceptions of that wine, or whether you've met the winemaker, whether you know them, whether you've been there.
Yeah, and all the more so when the wine's on its deathbed.
Right. Yeah. Getting off the topic a little bit, I know, but there was one thing I was keen to quiz you on. Gardening.
Tell your readers about my new book out in 2 weeks.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Which is on what topic?
It's called Hugh Johnson in the Garden.
Do you write more about wine or gardening?
Wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is wine your first love?
Yeah, I mean, I read about it before I read my book about trees,
Okay.
but not by a big margin. I mean,
Which would you say is your true love?
that's not a fair question.
I know it's not, but you have to choose.
Well, you don't have to choose.
You're going to either lose your garden or your cellar.
Oh, shit.
As the Viking said.
No, the answer is I'd rather lose my cellar because I can replace that.
Right.
But the trees I planted are the trees I planted.
Yeah.
But I read, the World Atlas Wine was 1971, and my tree book was 1973, so very close together. And I was in encyclopedic mood, and I'm I'm doing a new edition of the tree book for next year. So I just find the whole thing, they're both fabulous subjects. You never get to the bottom of them. You meet marvellous people by doing them, in both cases. The discussions are endless, and so is the interest. So
do you think they're subjects that go hand in hand? Do you think? There's obvious links between.
the vine would be a tree if it could.
Yeah, well, exactly. There are some obvious
backbone.
But I've come across a lot of people in wine that are also interested in music. But I don't know many wine.
Gardeners
Many wine, certainly in the writing scheme of things, that have got your passion for horticulture.
No. Well,
but it's when you think about it, it's a much more obvious link than music.
I suppose wine people are more interested in the fruit than the actual bark.
well, using music, that's different, because music and mathematics is a certain sort of approach to
so they say,
analysis.
Yeah.
Are very clear, aren't they? And that's the sort of organised analytical mind, which is the absolute opposite of mind. No organisation, no analysis, but a great deal of appreciation. I agree with you that I can't think of sort of wine and horticulture being close together. Partly it's a matter of money, actually. Gardeners generally don't have a lot of money. And they can't afford good wine, and so they just
That's true. Yeah. But to keep, I mean, is it expensive to even if you've got a modest garden? You know, say.
It needn't be expensive.
It's expensive to keep it.
No. I mean, if you do your own propagation, if you're really into it, you never buy a plant at all. Your friends give you cuttings, and you give them cuttings, and it can be quite a low-budget activity, really.
I remember you saying to me once that some of the gardening magazines were a little bit dull because it's the same from year to year. You know, the gardening year is the same one year to the next. So it's always, you know, you've always got your advice on pruning at a certain time of the year and this and the other. I don't know anything about gardening, but it's predictable.
An interesting point, actually, Guy, because that used to be the case. It's much less now because since the gardening industry and the garden centre business and everything else has become really rich, gardeners tend to be spending more on their patios and their heaters and their furniture and barbecues and everything else. I mean, they're buying hardware, really, and that all goes under the category gardening. And the gardening industry is investing in breeding in a way it never did before. So new plants, you know, your red delphiniums, your blue roses, not yet, but maybe, and everything that's different, supposed to be better, that's worth zillions of investment in the way it never was in the past. You know, the kind of gardening which is all about cuttings and passing on seed and that kind of thing is pretty old-fashioned now, really.
Right.
Hence the magazines keeping going.
Has climate change hit the world of gardening much?
Oh yeah. I mean, in this country it all looks very positive because suddenly you can grow olive trees, which you certainly couldn't do before.
Is it something that, going back to wine, is it something that you think is going to have a profound effect on wine in the next 50 years? Or? Because you must be quite close to that, you know, you must have from your interest in horticulture, you must have a view on that.
Yes, springs are getting earlier. I mean, I think the English wine industry is very obviously the beneficiary already. You know,
do you worry for some of the classic regions?
If you could have an earlier flowering, let's face it, in this country, you've got earlier flowering of the vines, and then not a great catastrophic frost. The vintage comes in earlier, and you've got a much better chance in every way, and that is happening. Yeah.
But is it not? When you say it's benefited the English wine industry, is it not that we've been getting better vintages because of not because of the weather, but you know, more knowledge about viticulture, better vinification techniques, and they would have happened anyway. I mean, without. Because the English wine industry has taken off over the last 5 or 6 years, coinciding with some dreadful summers.
Yeah. But also warmer springs, you see. I mean, I haven't analysed this, but it seems to me that what is crucial in this very northern vineyard climate is you get off to a quick start. Otherwise, if your vintage goes on to the end of October or something, you've got no chance of decent weather for picking the grapes.
So that spring which makes it.
I think that's one reason, and I think the other is the growing confidence, because you remember that not so many years ago people used to say that it's hybrids or nothing in this country, and frankly these sort of Schoenbergers and Madeleine Angevines and things are no great shape. You're never going to make really desirable wine out of them.
No.
It all tastes of rain, as Simon Hoggett said once. English wine tastes of rain. Which was true.
As soon as people had the confidence to plant Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, it started to happen. And most of all, when they realised that grapes don't ripen in Champagne either. It wasn't a question of bad grapes. It was only a question of getting 9 degrees or something. And away you go, because you can have the aromas of certain classic varieties. You can have their aromas without ripe grapes. And that's why I think sparkling wine is the future.
Do you? You're quite optimistic about it, are you?
Very.
Yeah.
It's an investment. Now, I think that we're on a roll in this country for there may be bad vintages, but they can still manage to make something saleable.
But I think global warming is again, and that's a confidence thing because there are so many wine regions who are being challenged, and they're so terrified of their region becoming unviable that they're searching out cooler climates, and that must be part of the whole impetus towards cooler climate regions.
Yeah, but I mean, that was always the motivation in California, wasn't it? They never looked for hot places. They were always the whole Davis formula, defining where the ideal degree days equivalent to Burgundy or something exist.
So have they always sort of acknowledged the importance of cool nights and warm days?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it was quite as well understood as that. But when whoever the professor was at Davis who drew up the original
degree
day map.
I know who you mean by that. I don't know his name.
It wasn't Hilger. That was a very fundamental understanding. Well, I mean, it was very simple. It was if the map looked like Burgundy, then you were onto a good thing.
Yeah. But this is what Parker's been fighting against, isn't it? I mean, he's always such a kind of demon of the European wine world, but he's always fought for, whether rightly or wrongly, he's always fought for the primacy of the land, hasn't he? And being honest to the climate and the topography you have.
I'm not sure that I've really noticed that.
Well, it's always been his thing. I mean, that's why he attacked Mondavi for trying to sort of chase this European style. And he said Mondavi wasn't being true to the...
I thought it was a complete farce, because Mondavi was actually trying to stick to the traditions of the Napa Valley. I mean, if you take... Mondavi was making wine closer to the old Inglenook, BV, Martini type, the ones I mentioned earlier, low degrees and more about structure than about fruit. And he was being rubbished by Parker, as I understood it. What a great follower, a great man. For not making these sort of hugely fruity strong wines.
Whereas he was chasing the older style of California wines, so Parker wanted to chase the newer style.
So what was the quote? It was quite funny, wasn't it? It was
it's quite aggressive.
Some Euro.
He said something like Tim Mondavi is chasing a
Euro notion of elegance.
Exactly.
I do remember
some notion of Euro elegance.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
That's
right. Yes, it was very funny.
I know, and I thought
a nasty little dig, actually, spiteful.
And I thought when I read it, well, I know whose side I'm on. Euro elegance is exactly where I want to be.